What follows an allemande? Written by Long de Shot. Read by Rashi. That evening, an intimate ball was hosted in the imperial palace. Crystalline chandeliers hung from the ceiling of a beautiful ballroom. Charming mignardies were being served from gleaming silver platters, and the string quartet began to weave together a beautiful tune to warm up with the prelude of the upcoming suite. Ferdinand recognized a few of the musicians by face, but only came to know them during the preceding banquet. The seating plan had placed Ferdinand amongst musicians, including the current director of the Mittelfranc Opera Company, the princess of Ferdinand's very own heart. Over their appetizers, he learned the names of the quintet. By the fish course, he was known as a keen fan of the opera, and by dessert, they talked as if they had known each other for many moons. Over their scones and compote, an eager member of the quintet asked if Ferdinand would be dancing that evening. He said he would most likely not, but expressed that he was looking forward to their performance regardless. A veiled disappointment was apparent in her expression, and from the corner of his eye came a questioning look from Manuela. Ferdinand pretended that he did not notice either. The quintet excused themselves early to prepare as soon as the last of the five finished their dessert, and after a cheese course, the banquet was concluded. Ferdinand was pleased with the thought of new friends, and it did not surprise him knowing that Hubert was at the helm of the logistics for this event. Ferdinand was eager to thank him for his hard work, and even more eager to ask whether it was Hubert himself who designed their seating plan. To Ferdinand's delight, Hubert entered the ballroom soon after Ferdinand had begun his search for him, but by his side was someone whose silhouette and gait was unfamiliar to Ferdinand. Hubert's companion was much shorter than him, and a stark contrast to Hubert's sleek and elegant silhouette. His companion sported a fashionable cape with a beautiful pair of heeled boots. As for his hair, he wore it long, and his mustache and beard were groomed meticulously. He had been seated next to Hubert during the banquet, but this was the first time Ferdinand could get a good look at his face. It was not one that he recognized. Certainly someone like him would leave an impression. He recognized his boots as one of his favorite cordwainers, and his hair was styled in a manner that was certainly in vogue in Enbar. Above all, Ferdinand would surely know of him if Hubert knew him. Ferdinand's gaze remained fixed on Hubert's mysterious companion, trying to decipher his identity. He came to a realization. Of the guest list that he was able to steal a glance of, there were around half a dozen names that Ferdinand did not recognize, 5 of which were the quintet, which meant that this individual was one of the remainders. He spied on them from the corner of the ballroom as soon as they entered. At the distance where Ferdinand was, he could not even read their lips, only noticing how they would laugh with one another. Ferdinand was so transfixed that he did not even notice the interlude of the quartet nearing its end. As the music offered the pair a lull, Hubert pulled out his hand to his companion to dance. Ferdinand gasped. He had not seen Hubert dance since a simple waltz at Garrick Mock, many years ago when they were both students. He had assumed that Hubert did not dance whatsoever, and it was the reason why Ferdinand had never asked him to dance. It was the same reason that Ferdinand himself did not dance at events such as these. That assumption was shattered, as Hubert danced an allemande with someone who was a stranger to Ferdinand. At one point, Hubert misstepped. The sight caused Ferdinand to wince. Hubert's partner laughed, and Hubert laughed with him. His companion gave him a few swift pats on the shoulder to reassure him, and Ferdinand watched them as a feeling of nausea overcame him, still transfixed at the sight. Ferdinand did not know what made him more jealous, that this man was able to dance with Hubert, or that it was Hubert that held out his hand to him first, so the two of them could dance. The music for their allemande came to a close, as did their dance. The quintet leafed through the pages of their part books in unison, and Hubert started to introduce his companion to the other guests. They stood arm in arm as Hubert spoke, making Ferdinand's stomach turn once more. Hubert's companion was boisterous, greeting people with handshakes and kisses to the hand and cheek, all of which were met with amused laughs. Those around him were enamored, or at least interested by this man that Hubert had introduced them to. The quintet had long since started playing for a courante, as Ferdinand watched Hubert peel himself away from the swarm of people his companion had amassed. Ferdinand approached him, as Hubert was eyeing up tartlets presented by an attendant, and in Hubert's hand was a goblet of wine. He greeted Ferdinand with a quick nod. Already restless, Ferdinand skipped any formalities. "Who was that person you were with?" Hubert was mid-bite of his tartlet. He covered his mouth as he chewed, and responded once he had swallowed. "The person you danced with, and then you introduced them to the treasurer of the Agricultural Union, among others. I did not recognize him." Hubert nodded in recognition, as he took another bite and another drink of his wine. "You would not have. No, he is just a merchant." "Just a merchant?" Ferdinand's mind reeled. It did not seem like just a person to him, seeing Hubert offered to dance in allemande with that stranger. Ferdinand was so shaken that he did not even care that Hubert had not given him a name. Ferdinand moved on to his second question. "Have you known each other for long?" "Yes." "He?" A fond smile played on Hubert's lips, one that brought a weight to Ferdinand's stomach. "We have known each other for a long time," Hubert said, looking into his cup and swirling the contents. He was still smiling. "You could say that I am a client of his." His response made Ferdinand uneasy. A client?" Ferdinand repeated. He tried to imagine what services this stranger could offer to Hubert. "Something unsavory. He's looking to switch professions." Hubert took a sip of wine. "Unsavory," Ferdinand echoed, as his mind began to imagine the worst. "He deals in solvents, tinctures, and what not," Hubert answered, and Ferdinand narrowed his eyes. "Poisons," Hubert added, his voice almost a whisper. Ferdinand gave him a nod, unsure whether that was good or bad news. What is he doing here? Ideally, he would like to change professions. He was hoping to foster some connections related to his business venture by attending this very ball, of course. Hubert finished his wine and set his goblet to one side. I owed him a favor, and now we are even, aside from a pint of ale I have promised, far in the future. In the distance, Hubert's companion was surrounded by those enchanted by him. With a gesture of his hand, he said something that made laughter ripple around him. Ferdinand began to make sense of it. His companion was established as a trusted and good friend of Hubert's through their dance together, and so was smoothly introduced as such. It would be amongst a larger number of their cohorts compared to the limited number of people that surrounded their part of the table at the banquet. A favor from Hubert was his appearance at this intimate ball as a +1 of the imperial minister. "Are you privy to what sort of business venture he plans to embark on?" Ferdinand asked out of curiosity. "Of course, only if you are allowed to share." Hubert gave a small grin. "He intends to open and run an ale-house, hence the pint I was promised. I am sure he would be happy to see you as well." Ferdinand thought of an ale-house at the center of a community, filled with music and song and happy people. He thought of his own fond memories that he had collected at such establishments over the years. "That sounds lovely. I would be delighted to join you, if that would be allowed." "Lovely?" "I would say that he is specializing, choosing to deal in only one kind of poison, above all others." Ferdinand snickered. "The dose makes the poison. Is that not what you say?" "My mother used to say that alcohol consumed on any day of the week, ending in the letter Y, wasn't poison. Your lovely gem of a mother, whose son finished a goblet of wine," Ferdinand said with a laugh. Well, you see, Ferdinand, he began, slow and mischievous. What I was practicing is something I learnt from her. It's something called Mithridism. Mithridism? Ferdinand repeated, already beaming. If it worked, it would take you more than a single measure of brandy until you became all giggly. Hubert pursed his lips, and Ferdinand watched him and wondered how Hubert would play it off. I decided to start from today, Hubert said coolly. Amused, Ferdinand played along. Oh, is that so? I happen to have a small bottle I received as a gift. Perhaps we could partake in some Mithridatism later tonight. If I have not sufficiently poisoned myself until then. Certainly. They both laughed, and Ferdinand gave a playful nudge to Hubert's arm, who received it cordially. An attendant, one who Ferdinand recognized as one of Hubert's agents, offered them both wine. Ferdinand made a comment to hint that he recognized her, making both Hubert and his agent laugh. As he made small talk with her, she opened a bottle of something fizzy and poured Ferdinand a goblet of it. He noticed that she did not offer Hubert any, and Ferdinand wondered if she knew his preference in wine. As she disappeared to attend to more guests, a question came to Ferdinand as he sipped on his drink. Out of curiosity as well, what was his favourite to you? Quite a long story. Remind me later, Hubert said, reaching for another tartlet that was offered to him. It was a specific phrase they used with each other. In other words, the topic was not suitable for their current setting. His response was an appropriate watchword. Over coffee, then, Ferdinand said. Hubert smiled. I thought we were having brandy. A peal of laughter came from Ferdinand. Only if you would like to. The music of the string quartet began to change once more, to which Ferdinand could see that Hubert's former companion was asking Manuela for her hand for the upcoming sarabande, who appeared to accept in pure delight. He thought of one member of the quintet, hoping to see him dance, and his pulse quickened. Ferdinand cleared his throat, as he mustered all of the courage he had inside of him. What do you say, Hubert? As good friends, and as two people that have overcome all manner of hardships? Hubert raised his brow. For a toast, I believe I would have to find a drink first. I mean... Ferdinand cleared his throat once more, hoping to fight off the jittery feeling that had started to possess him. I meant that we could dance. A pause came between them. In those brief seconds, Ferdinand wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Us? As a pair? Hubert asked. Overcome with nervousness, Ferdinand was only able to give him a nod in response. Why? Ferdinand felt his chest fall. You danced with your merchant friend? That was a stunt. He did not know anyone here prior to this evening. Besides, I can barely dance. Without thinking, he began to argue with him. You danced a decent allemande with him? Hubert frowned. We practiced beforehand, Hubert said, and the thought of them dancing more than the one time that Ferdinand saw brought about another spell of jealousy. But I know how to dance, definitely far better than him, Ferdinand did not say. I could have taught you. Hubert continued. Even then, I managed to step on his feet. I have no desire to make a fool of you. Ferdinand bit his tongue. You certainly would not. Even if you did, it would not matter to me. You could step on my feet as many times as you would like, and I would let you. He was by no means oblivious, and had no desire to be stubborn for the sake of it. This was a polite rejection from Hubert. Ferdinand began to recant his request. I just thought that it would not hurt to ask. I was not aware that you danced at all prior to tonight. Tonight was an exception. Ferdinand gave him a small nod. An exception. He was grateful that Hubert was courteous enough to let him down gently. It's quite all right. I understand. Ferdinand would need to say. He would have to manage it, without sounding like its heart was breaking into a million pieces. As he tried to gather the courage and strength to say it, the words did not come to him, even as many seconds passed. He would need to say it before he could excuse himself from the conversation, before he could slink off to nurse his own wounds. His gaze was fixed on the quintet, as the first few bars of the sarabande came from the cellist. Ferdinand's chest ached. When he took a brave glance at Hubert, he appeared almost bashful as their eyes met. "Ferdinand, It's all right. I quite understand," Ferdinand said. His voice only trembled slightly. "I mean it when I say I can barely dance. I could barely dance an allemande, and I could not even manage a courante or a gigue. I would not be able to dance a sarabande or anything following it, aside from a minuet." Hubert trailed off. Ferdinand let out a breath, one he did not realize he was holding. He was shocked at Hubert's admission. "Not even a gavotte?" Ferdinand did not say. "But at Garrigmach, all those years ago, you danced a decent waltz." "Please." Hubert gave a wry grin, shaking his head. "We were children. Anyone can dance a waltz." At the ball to celebrate Garrigmach's establishment, Edelgard had made it clear that she had enough of him after their sarabande. After her, Ferdinand had pestered Hubert for a dance. Hubert had scoffed and refused him, saying he did not have the time or energy for infantilism. Ferdinand was insistent on demonstrating that his steps were polished and flawless, much more so than Edelgard's. Part of him was embarrassed to recall it. Another part felt a little nostalgic. And the final part of him felt ashamed. He did not remember who else he danced with on that night, or if he had even danced much at all. It did not matter, and both Edelgard and Hubert had been harboring something much larger and graver than Ferdinand's mastery of a passe-pied. Perhaps it was true that Hubert did not have the luxury of infantilism, and perhaps it was the same reason that he could only dance a simple waltz, an allemande, and a minuet. Back then, he knew so little about the world and of living. Even now, it was a past that Ferdinand could not fully comprehend. "I would love to dance a minuet with you, if you would be willing," Ferdinand said. Hubert's grin softened into something warmer. "If dancing would make you happy, we can wait for a minuet. It is not dancing alone that would make me happy. Dancing with you would." "Ha!" Hubert brought a hand to his mouth as he snickered. A blush had risen to Hubert's cheeks, which Ferdinand found himself delighted to notice. "With my 2 left feet? I wonder if it will. I may very well step on your nice new boots as well." Ferdinand smiled at him, elated. "I would say that it is a small price to pay for a dance with you. You can step on me whenever you like." Hubert let out another laugh, one that made Ferdinand's chest sore. "Ferdinand, are you so intoxicated?" He had only consumed half a small goblet of sparkling wine, yet the feeling of exhilaration that came over him made him wonder otherwise, maybe a little bit. "Well, I would suggest that you pace yourself if you wish to dance. I will need someone to take the lead. And we are having brandy after, are we not?" Ferdinand chuckled. Yes, of course." His chest pounded as the sarabande began to taper, and following a sarabande could be any movement. Ferdinand did not know when the quintet would play a minuet. He saw the quintet confer with one another before coming to an agreement, and Ferdinand silently hoped for his minuet. The quintet flickered through their part books once more before bringing to life the distinct rhythm and melody of a passe-pied. Coursing through him was a mixture of nervousness, anticipation, and excitement. Ferdinand took a generous sip of wine as Hubert watched the other guests dance. Ferdinand watched him instead. "I once asked to dance a passe-pied with you." Hubert pursed his lips. "Did you? Back at Garrigmach, years ago when we were students." Ferdinand hummed. A passe-pied can be quite fun. I like it. I must have refused. I would not know where to begin with a passe-pied. A sudden thought came to Ferdinand that made his chest stir. Well, if you fancied it, I could teach you. Hubert gave Ferdinand a blank stare in response, prompting him to continue. A passe-pied, or anything else. I could teach you how to dance a courante, a sarabande, a gigue, or even a gavotte. You could practice your allemande as well, whenever you would like. I always saw any kind of ballroom dance as frivolous. I never cared to learn. At one point, I wondered if I would have the luxury to dance without a care in the world. Ferdinand learned to dance because he was his father's son, and perhaps Hubert did the opposite, for the very same reason. Ferdinand wanted to hold his hand. I had assumed that was the case for you. But the world is a different place now, is it not? Their eyes met, and Hubert smiled at him. It is, yes. As Ferdinand returned the smile, Hubert averted his gaze. Though, I will warn you, my last teacher gave up after the allemande. I would think that someone who toiled for hours upon hours to be proficient in all manners of dance would go frustrated if they were stuck tutoring a horrid novice. Ferdinand shook his head. We all start somewhere, and my own proficiency is only by circumstance. It would be my pleasure to teach you. Hubert's amused grin brought about a strange bout of courage from Ferdinand. And besides, if you learned to dance properly, we could dance the night away. Hubert chortled, and Ferdinand felt his chest sore. Dance the night away, Hubert said between laughs. The two of us? In truth, Ferdinand was stunned by his own boldness. He could feel himself blush, as he was overcome by a feeling of shyness. Would you like that? Hubert's laughs dwindled, and he did not say anything. When Ferdinand could brave a glance at Hubert, he did not meet his eyes. His elation turned into dread, as he convinced himself that he crossed a boundary, one that he was never meant to impose upon. Perhaps dancing the night away held some uncomfortable romantic connotations. Sorry, Ferdinand said, his apology coming out as a quick breath. When their gazes met, Ferdinand could not tell if Hubert's grin was out of pity or out of fondness. He spoke softly, after a short pause. For? Ferdinand almost tripped over his words. It was brazen and presumptuous to say such a thing. A brief lull came between them, and Hubert cleared his throat. Well, I personally do not mind it. I would be happy to dance with you, as long as I gained a certain amount of mastery. But whether I could keep up for the entire night... Ferdinand let out a quiet sigh of relief. It is but a figure of speech. We can stop whenever you would fancy it. In response, Hubert only smiled. The passe-pied came to a close, and Ferdinand found himself holding a breath once more. A gavotte began to play instead of their minuet, and Ferdinand continued to wait. He finished his cup of wine and set it to one side. Hubert was offered a wine to his tastes, one that was dark and tannic. As the two of them watched the other guests begin to dance, a quiet laugh came from Hubert. What is it? Ferdinand asked. Hubert swirled his wine. Only reminiscing. I wonder if you recall it. It was a garrigmock. Ferdinand was captivated by the fond smile that played on Hubert's lips. Go on. It was after a sip of wine and a short pause that Hubert finally spoke. During the war, at garrigmock, you said you fancied me. It was as if Ferdinand was plunged into icy water. I did? Hubert's gaze remained on the inside of his goblet. Well, you did not say, but you alluded to it. Alluded? Ferdinand dreaded what brazen and shameless deed he may have committed in the past, one that he could not find the memory of. Did I? You had something, and I asked if it was for someone you fancied. You said yes, and handed it to me." Ferdinand stared at Hubert, who still swirled his wine, unable to recall anything of the sort. When their eyes met, Hubert's smile deepened. "We exchanged gifts. You gave me coffee, and I gave you tea, a Myron pine needle, if I recall correctly. We partook in our gifts following, and we shared a small bite of cake." A sliver of a memory came back to him. It was warmer than usual for early spring, and they sat outside. They exchanged gifts, made each other their drinks, and then split a generous slice of sponge cake made with rosemary. He could recall nothing but the fondness he felt for Hubert, and how much he enjoyed the cake that they shared. Ferdinand stumbled over his words as he spoke. "My apologies, but I do not quite recall when I said, or when I alluded to it." Hubert hummed. "I had assumed so." He had thought whatever he felt towards Hubert was secret and unable to affect him. Ferdinand did not know what to do, and thought to cobble together an apology. "Well, did you?" Hubert asked, his voice quieter and softer than Ferdinand had ever heard him speak. "Back then, did you fancy me?" Ferdinand felt his face flush. "I did. Yes. I still do. Perhaps a lot more than then." Ferdinand stuttered, and he could not bring himself to look at Hubert, even as he confessed. "I was jealous when that friend of yours danced with you. I thought he had stolen you away from me." Hubert chuckled, but his tone was gentle as he spoke. "Me? Away from you?" Ferdinand bit his lip, much too late, as another blunder had left it. "I apologize. It is presumptuous to even think that you could be something that I... Ferdinand trailed off. The longer he ran his mouth, the deeper the hole he had dug himself into became. After a pause, Hubert spoke. "It does not bother me." Ferdinand finally looked at him. "It does not bother you?" he repeated, unsure if he had misheard him. Hubert's eyes flitted from his cup of wine to Ferdinand. A fond smile came to Hubert's lips as his eyes met, and a blush had risen to his cheeks. Not in the slightest. It was only after a breath of relief that it sank in for Ferdinand. As Hubert cast his gaze away, with his cheeks still pink, Ferdinand blinked, and wondered if he was truly reading shyness from Hubert's expression. Ferdinand smiled back at him. "Oh, I can be yours if you'd be willing to have me," Hubert murmured. Ferdinand drew in a breath. "Willing? Hubert!" Ferdinand uttered, and he took Hubert's hands in his. "I would be delighted. It would make me the happiest person in all of Fodland." Hubert's smile deepened. "Very well, then. I shall try my best." If they were not in public, Ferdinand would have embraced him. Perhaps Ferdinand would have kissed him, if Hubert allowed it. Instead, he held both of his hands as the gavotte came to an end. A brief lull from the quintet followed, and Ferdinand wondered if one of them met his eyes as they looked through their part books. Within a moment, the quintet resumed with the tune and rhythm of a minuet. Ferdinand turned to Hubert once more. "Oh, Hubert, our minuet! Shall we?" "Of course," Hubert said, smiling back at him.